20 seconds. And you are live at this point, so it is yours. And I will make sure other people's video are stopped. And it's your meeting, Laura. Take it away.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the November 24th meeting of the Wenatchee School Board. We'll welcome you and call the meeting to order. And we will begin our meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance, which we will do completely in sync and as if we were totally rehearsed on this. So if you would join me, we aren't going to stand in the Pledge of Allegiance. I would appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think we need a metronome for that.
The first half was pretty good.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so on the agenda today, we first have our consent agenda, which consists of the meetings from our November 10th meeting, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, surplus report, contracts, enrollment, and financial reports. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I will second it. That's Julie.
First and seconded, is there any discussion? Okay, we will take a roll call vote. Julie?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
And Laura is aye as well. That motion passes. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have citizen comments, and it's my understanding that a few people have signed up for citizen comment this evening. How many people do we have, please?
We have two. We have one that still hasn't logged in yet, so if they pop in during that time, I'll let them in and we can get them. But
Okay.
we have two to start with, so Kim's gonna turn her camera on. Hopefully she has her timer, otherwise we'll go old school and I'll look at my watch and let them know the time.
Okay.
Just a
So
reminder, they have 3 minutes.
Mhm.
And the first up will be Brian Hurling.
And Brian, if you would give us, we already know your name, would you give us your address, please?
3005 Edward Street in Malaga.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And forgive me for the light behind me. Thank you so much for letting me speak today. As we continue to wrestle with how to safely teach our students during this time, I believe we need good data to help us to determine how to make good decisions. I'm very thankful that the school district has publicized the COVID status of our building and staff with relevant and timely information on the district website. I understand that the data is upkept every week, but I would ask for assurances that any outbreaks larger than 5 individuals would be immediately publicized to all members of the school affected. As I read current research, there is a growing belief that super spreader events drive the growth of this disease. Estimates believe that roughly 20% of infected people account for 60% or more of its spread, and they can even transmit the virus through air circulation systems and that will expose people that may not have considered themselves exposed using the standard rules that the health district uses. There have been multiple documented cases in various environments of people becoming infected through ventilation systems. I would ask for that from the district just to keep our staffs aware of things that will be happening in their buildings. Over the past month, there have been several stories relayed to me by my peers about potential exposures to students or parents with COVID. To my knowledge, none of the potential exposures have resulted in transmission to educators, which is good, but there was one common trait. The educator was unaware of the COVID status of the other individual. As we contemplate a higher degree of contact in our classrooms, one of the critical considerations we must address is a lack of transparency regarding COVID cases in our community. We cannot protect ourselves from an unseen attacker if we have incomplete or non-existent information. Leaving educators in the dark with regards to the COVID status of their students deprives us of one of the few tools available to us in this fight. Knowledge is power. Knowledge allows us to protect ourselves and proactively seek testing before we expose others. Educators have been asked to be frontline workers, and we can avail ourselves of COVID status information in ways that few other groups can. It is my current understanding that HIPAA laws prevent the dissemination of an individual's COVID status. Is there a way for a select number of school district employees to be deputized by the health district to receive this specific information and to use it to alert staff and students of potential risk? I would ask that the school district consider that and talk to the health department about ways to work around the HIPAA laws that are currently inhibiting our ability to spread information and keep our communities safe. We also need aggressive, timely contact tracing from the health department with regards to the staff and students participating in in-person schooling. Is there the possibility of the health district adding a question or two to their contact tracing questions that directly relates to exposures of schools? The high degree of exposure of schools to COVID necessitates a higher magnitude of attention and care to its health and risk. As can be seen in England, South Korea, Israel, and even some German schools, schools are deeply connected to COVID infections in a community. I do not share the optimism of Dr. Oster. I believe a much higher level of caution is warranted. Weekly testing of educators in contact with students will enable us to stay ahead of potential outbreaks. In summary, thank you for publicizing our COVID data. The more data we have, the better informed and protected we can be. Please coordinate with the health department, as I know you are, but increase that coordination so the school district can be fully aware of all COVID cases in our valley that can affect our staff and students. Please ask the health district for more rigorous and timely contact tracing with respect to educators. Please test educators regularly, and please continue to be cautious about returning to in-person education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Has our next public commenter made
Yep,
themselves?
Tina Nick Van Brown, you are next.
Okay,
We never had the third one show up, so
okay.
we can move on from there, Laura, and then hopefully we can get her next meeting. We'll
Very good.
communicate over email with her.
Well, first of all, welcome to my classroom. This is where I now teach. I am a Wenatchee Internet Academy 5th grade digital educator. Prior to this, I spent 16 years at Lincoln Elementary. However, this is my 20th year as an educator. I want to thank the WSD leadership team and school board for providing families the opportunity to have their students attend WSD's first K-8 virtual school. My experience thus far has only been positive. That is because WIA is committed to having partnerships with families, students, and staff. I understand my role is to provide engaging, interactive instruction, but it is also equally important that I provide a safe learning environment that encourages students to share their challenges and celebrations about school and their everyday life. I am also a mom of a 4th grader at Washington Elementary. As a family, we've made a decision to keep her in the 2.0 setting with the possibility of returning to school in person. That's because I know her teacher is providing the instruction she needs, but I understand it's my responsibility to provide increased opportunities to help maintain her physical and mental well-being. But I'm also a wife of a first responder. My husband is a flight medic who transports critical COVID-19 patients to hospitals around this country as their last resort of treatment. As a family, we know the risk he places himself in on a daily basis, and we recognize the responsibility we have as a family to keep our friends safe from any possible exposure we ourselves have encountered. And I tell you all this because I feel it's important that my students' families, my colleagues, and my community know that I too am a working mom with a student in remote learning who also has daily anxiety about the safety of her family. But I want to thank you. Thank you for making your decisions about our students and our staff's safety based on information from our local health experts. Thank you for recognizing that families in our larger community are partners in educating the whole student. Would I rather be in a classroom with my students each day? Would I prefer my only child to be engaged with peers in a classroom? Would I love to go to bed at night knowing I will come home after his shift? Yeah, I do. but I value the health and safety of my community, and I trust my colleagues to continue providing a safe, remote learning environment for our students and my own child. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. So as a reminder, the citizen comment portion of our agenda is a time for the board to hear from folks, but that we do not respond or engage with the commenters. And it is not because we didn't hear what you had to say. So thank you for those who came forward. So next on our agenda, we have a reading science update.
Yeah, I'll kick it off first. Thank you, Laura. And we'll have Dr. Stacy Bain talking to us and a host of other friends. As you can see on the screen, we're going to have a number of different individuals coming in and having a conversation with us. You know, this is kind of a follow-up to, feels like about 10 years ago that Stacy and Sarah and many others were here with us. But this is a follow-up to the work that our educators, Stacy, other members in our district office have been engaged in over these almost exactly a year now. Crazy how quickly time flies since we really started moving in this direction. So with that, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Stacy Bain, and she will take it from here.
Good evening, school board. Thank you, Dr. Gordon, for that introduction. We are so thrilled to be here tonight to be able to talk about the journey of which we are on in the Wenatchee School District. Is everybody able to see this slide? Okay, fantastic. So board, I would like to present tonight to you Mr. Tim Shepard, Teresa Hines, Anna McGuire, Shane Rennie, Roxana Vignata, Allison Hurt, Kevin Parr, and Lori McLaughlin. These are individuals from across the elementary schools that are going to speak to the work that is currently ongoing in the Wenatchee School District. If we remember nothing else from our time together, I would like us to remember the word we. We in the Wenatchee School District are making a difference for the families and the students in our schools. We are working together to ensure that all scholars can read. We are building content. We are linking arms so that we can ensure a community that is literate. So the word tonight is we. To Dr. Gordon's point, we are in year 2 of the Impact Literacy Achievement Initiative. We hashtagged this last year as Wenatchee Reads. And what that means for us, is that we have coined a phrase, and it is impact. And impact means that we are having daily core instruction so that we can ensure that scholars are able to read. We in the Wenatchee School District have taken the reading science from the preponderance of research evidence. We have put that into these packets of volumes, the content, the knowledge that scholars must have in order to read. We have provided on-site coaching support, and we continue to provide professional learning opportunities based upon reading science. What would cognitive science say about how scholars learn to read proficiently? What would neurologists say? What would linguists say? That is the knowledge that we want to ensure that every single educator has when they hit the classroom, and to take the instructional materials that we have to combine reading science into instruction. So let me just review before the team speaks about their compelling stories regarding our impact journey. We believe in the Wenatchee School District that 95% of the human population can attain literacy rates. And we believe this because we know that Reed Lyon went to Congress in 1998 and made the compelling case that we as a community of individuals in the United States of America can attain high literacy rates. We know that to be true. We also believe that what educators know and the practices that they utilize every day will determine whether or not scholars are proficient in reading. That's why we are committed to professional learning that is ongoing, That is why we are committed as a Wenatchee School District to make sure that our Wonders instructional materials, the curriculum that we spent a lot of money for several years ago, is implemented with the highest amount of reading science fidelity. We have instructional modeling, we have lesson planning templates, and we have a full court press to this commitment to make sure that the Wenatchee School District is proficient in reading. So now I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Teresa Hines, and she's going to talk about impact and what her story is in terms of changing the lives of the readers in her classroom. And before I have her do that, I want to just define impact again. Impact is not something that we purchased from a company. Impact is our own coined phrase. We are making an impact in the lives of our scholars by the practices and the knowledge that we have regarding reading science that we can demonstrate in instruction every day. We are making an impact based upon the reading science that we apply in classrooms as a collective group of educators. So that's what impact is. So, Teresa Hines.
Thank you. So I am impact. Every day I do impact in my classroom, and it has been life-changing for both myself and my students. This is my 20th year teaching, and typically about 70% of my students come to me in the 3rd grade, not reading at grade level. And even though I am a nationally board certified teacher in literacy, I still did not know what to do to make students successful in literacy. And when I went to the impact training last year with Stacy, my mind was blown of how I could use this in my classroom every day and have students truly become literate when they left my room. And so I went back that very first day and I looked at the Wonders curriculum that I had helped adopt and said, okay, how can I overlay Wonders with this impact routine and make it successful using both the curriculum that was purchased and what I can do with reading science. And so I jumped in and I started making plans for my 3rd grade team of using all of the vocabulary and the phonics skills and the spelling words through Wonders through this impact routine. And after I started using it every single day with my class last year before we went remotely, I started seeing amazing growth in my students. Over the summer, Stacy asked me if I would be willing to work on the impactor team and start creating the plans for 3rd through 5th grade. So over the course of the summer and this fall, I have created all of the Wonders impact plans for all of 3rd through 5th grade. I was also able to begin modeling in the 3-5 classrooms at Lincoln and be able to help other teachers start implementing impact in their classrooms. The most amazing thing that impact has had for me this year is not only working with teachers, but being able to implement it every single day in my classroom. And I have 2 students in particular this year that came to me reading at a beginning of 1st grade level. And with it being remote, all I have had the majority of time spent in our ELA meetings is doing impact routine, going through and learning the sounds and the syllable types and all of the work that goes into impact. And just last week, I had those 2 young ladies read with me, and both of them were able to read through a beginning of 3rd grade passage where they could not have done that 2 months ago. And it is completely because of the impact routine being used every single day with those students. And all of a sudden they are able to read things that they could not even come close to accessing 2 months ago. And both of them were so excited for the other one that they started clapping on the Zoom meeting because they were just elated that they could actually all of a sudden read things that were so far out of touch just a short time ago. So I am impact because I am using it every single day. I am helping write the plans, and I am helping my students become literate people in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa Hines, and thank you for facilitating training for the intervention specialists tomorrow. There are about 35 people that will be in attendance of your facilitation of professional learning tomorrow morning from 8 to 10. So thank you for that. Okay, and next up is Miss Anna McGuire.
All right, hello everyone. I have been a part of the Impact Literacy since the summer as well. I was invited to join the team to help develop the Spanish weekly plans, and I had the opportunity to work on 3 different weeks. And just recently, I had an opportunity also to meet with the Spanish teachers to guide them and empowering them in creating and continuing the work of creating their own plans. I'm very thankful to Mrs. Bush for hiring a Spanish expert that's going to be working with the Spanish team as well. I think that will definitely help us make some great and needed improvements in our Spanish literacy program. I'm just very, very happy with all the work that has gone into the impact, literacy impact. I think it's very impressive how quickly it kind of took off. I truly believe that this is, what's been needed to make, to help our readers become, more skilled. I'm just thankful to be a part of this team, and I'm grateful that we are putting something in place to help our students become better readers.
Thank you so much, Anna. Appreciate it. Miss Shane Rennie, are you able to put your camera on, Miss Shane?
Here. Hi, I'm Shane Rennie, and I am a reading intervention specialist at Washington Elementary. And last year, when we started having our kinder and first grade teams attend these trainings with this Dr. Bain that we weren't really sure who she was, they were all coming back and they had this just super this energy that we were like, where is this coming from? Like, this is great. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. And I really felt left out, and I don't like to be left out. And so once we got to go, I was like, I get it. I understand. And I felt like what I was getting was these little pieces of super important but simple things we can be doing with our kids to help in reading. We all know that phonology and phonemic awareness was very important, but we tend to gloss over it. It's in our program, but our program is this big. And so what Dr. Bain was able to do is help us take this part of our program that is so essential to helping our kids learn to read and build that foundation, and put it in a manageable, routine way that everybody could teach. We don't all have to be robots and be breathing and saying the same thing, but we're doing and we're talking about the same things. So when they go from kinder to first grade, they're just building upon it. They're building upon those same routines, so we can easily see their growth. And as intervention, then we can start to truly intervene with these kids and be like, really, they didn't get this. Often we kind of assume as kids get older, they don't need this, they don't need this. And we're realizing they maybe didn't get it, they still need it, but how do we teach some of these primary skills in a more sophisticated way for our older learners? And so I have really appreciated that vertical alignment. After attending, I went back and said, okay, I can't, this isn't more. Often when we go to training, we're told, do this, do this, do this. And we're like, but when, but how? I can't do one more thing. I'm done. This was like, okay, all this is telling me is how to teach my Wonders curriculum and do it better. And so it was more impactful for our students. And I immediately was like Teresa, I was like, okay, so this is what I need. Here's the words I can pull, and just started working together. And watching this snowball within our building and in the district has been really empowering. It's been motivating. We've gotten to work on teams. We're working with people we're not used to always working with. We're asking questions, but we're able to have common conversations. And I feel like I am now truly doing more intervention with the kids who truly need it, giving them that second dose as opposed to that first tier of instruction. And I feel like as we've moved on, we've had to really buff this up with our 3 through 5, because some of it's, we tend to say, you hear in education, oh, in third grade, we don't teach kids how to read anymore. They're reading to learn. And kind of shifting that mindset of like, we're reading to learn from kindergarten on. We're reading about, oh yeah, what was the story about? What was their problem? How did they fix their problem? We're talking about that in kindergarten. And in 5th grade, we're talking about Greek and Latin roots, and we're talking about word parts. So we gain that meaning from the word, that we don't just skip over it. And I just feel like we're always learning how to read, and we're always reading to learn. And this is just an opportunity to efficiently meld that. And going back and starting this immediately with my kids, when we went to online, we just continued. We were able to, and yeah, online, it's, everything is not as great, but we had that routine in place. So we could just pick up and we could keep going. And my kids, who their life felt like was kind of being tossed in the air, they're like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. And we could continue to grow. So I thank Stacy for her time. I thank Dr. Gordon for his commitment to this, because there have been a lot of meetings, there's been a lot of time, and it's making an impact. Our kids are reading, they're enjoying it. My own daughter said to me, who's a kindergartner, going back to in class, she's like, oh, I can't wait to go back to school because I want to do onset and rhyme with my teacher. I don't want to do it at home. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what is onset and rhyme, because of course I try to do things with her, but according to her, I don't know how to help anybody learn how to read. But she could tell me, she could say the onset's the first part of the word, and the rhyme starts at the vowels, by the way, just the vowels. But I don't know the vowels all the way yet, Mom, but I'm working on it. And so that, I feel like when a kindergartner can tell her dad too, the literacy routine is a very important part of my day. Like, and she's not getting it from me, okay? She's getting it from her teacher, and it's super, I just feel very excited. It's been fun. Some of it's very hard work putting this all together, but the work that goes in is being used by our teachers. And I think that's where we get the biggest bang for our buck. So that's what I have to say.
Oh, thank you, Shane Rennie, and thank you for building all of the content. Roxana, is your camera available to be on?
I think it's off by the host.
Okay.
Which is okay. Oh, never mind. All right. So this is my 30-second impact story, and I ramble a lot when it's me talking to adults. So I apologize. So I am a former Wenatchee School District student. I am also an English language learner. English is not my native language. And going to the training was a very eye-opening moment for me, just because I felt that this is something that was left out by learning from college professors, and learning the science behind reading was, like I said, an eye-opening moment, just because there are things that I didn't know about. So going back and sharing that with my students is a form of social justice and equity. And when you start talking about social justice and equity, you're bringing reading as a contributing to new learning by students. And when you do that, you're also addressing social and emotional learning. And when we do that, we open the doors to empathy and kindness in students. So I think there's this giant circle going on when you provide a routine and a program such as Impact to students.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time tonight and for your commitment to learning and your commitment to the community.
Thank you.
You're one in a million. Miss Allison Hurt.
Hello, I am Allison Hurt, and I teach first grade at Lincoln Elementary, and I have just absolutely loved teaching impact literacy. When I first began teaching in the Wenatchee School District almost 20 years ago, there was not a reading curriculum, so I had to come up with my own materials for every reading lesson that I taught. My students were completely at the mercy of how well I taught myself as we went along. And then when we adopted Wonders a few years ago, I was excited that I finally got to work with an actual curriculum that I wasn't making up. But unfortunately, I still struggled to get my students reading. And this is why last year when Dr. Stacy Bain introduced us to impact literacy, I just feverishly took in every single word that she said, because I could suddenly see that there was this link between the way that we were going to be teaching and this curriculum. So I, just like a few others have said, I instantly went back to my class. I started implementing the very next day, and to be honest, was completely stunned at the immediate growth that my students started making. And for the first time in my teaching career, I was teaching literacy in a way that worked and was completely invigorated. I have been the most invigorated this last few months, probably the hardest few months of my career with everything COVID, and yet I've been the most invigorated with teaching reading because of what I see in my students. Because of all of that growth, I literally could not help but begin working with colleagues across the district, designing plans and materials that wove impact and wonders together for myself and my colleagues. This has just been an amazing experience.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your content generation. Appreciate you. Mr. Kevin Parr.
Hi, I'm Kevin Parr, a first grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary School. And when Impact was first introduced to us last year, it was made very clear that Impact was a program for all students, and that all meant all. So I immediately went down to our self-contained special ed room and found a first grade student who was ready to begin transitioning to a first grade general ed classroom. And he was able to join us for Impact. He had a paraprofessional with him for about 3 weeks, and then that para was able to disappear just because of how successful this kid was able to be in the classroom. And after seeing his growth and the rest of the class grow with him, I was very certain that this truly was a program for all. I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've never been so confident that a specific program was so directly linked to student growth and student learning than I am with this impact literacy. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for being the role model for inclusive practices. Appreciate you. Lori McLaughlin.
Hi, so my name is Lori McLaughlin, and I teach first grade at John Newberry Elementary School. And just like everybody else, I was trained last year and I used it in the spring. I loved it. Unfortunately, though, with COVID hitting, I didn't get to see the total benefits of it since I didn't get to see how my kids ended. So this year with starting online, I really saw the benefits of it. So teaching online, you're not sure whether they're getting it or not. You're just hoping they're doing it. You can see them doing it. But you couldn't really hear them because you couldn't have all their microphones on at once. And so now that we're back in the classroom, I'm just amazed. I mean, all my first graders, for one of the first times ever, they all know their sounds. They're segmenting words. Even the ones that say I can't read, you know, they'll segment a word and they're like, I got it. So they're seeing their successes, they're excited about it, and I'm just so happy for them. And also what I have loved to see this year is I currently have a student teacher. And so I've been out in the hallways a lot. I go down to the second grade hallway, I hear them doing it. The kids are excited, they're having fun, first grade, kindergarten. And what has really made my day lately is listening to the fourth grade classrooms online. They're in there clapping syllables. They're just having a great time, and it's exactly what we're doing. Their words are just more complex. So that's kind of my success story. I'm just really excited just to see how great it's been even online. So I love it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori, and thank you for your leadership. Mr. Tim Shepard.
Well, hello, everyone. Tim Shepard, principal at Lincoln Elementary. As an instructional leader, I think it's important for me to be focusing on the adults' behaviors. And so why is that important? Well, as Dr. Bain mentioned, it's the educator knowledge and practice that will determine the student proficiency. And as Dr. Gordon would say, we need to grow the big people if we want to grow those little people. So here's what I'm noticing at Lincoln and that other elementary administrators at their own building about adult behavior. Across Lincoln Elementary, the teachers are daily in that routine live each day, whether it's K2 in person or 3-5 online. Educators are using the learned instructional strategies, procedures, and routines to support the foundational and skills critical for learning to read. They're adjusting their schedules to make sure to have time for the literacy routines and adapting strategies for how to best learn reading science while online. I also think it's important to mention here about collective teacher efficacy. Collective teacher efficacy is the collective belief of teachers in their ability to positively affect students. Research shows that a school staff that believes they can make a positive difference very likely will. Together, teachers can achieve more, especially if they collectively believe they can do so. So like nothing I have experienced before in my 25 years in the Wenatchee School District, the implementation of the reading science through the impact literacy routines has brought our K-5 staff together, moving forward all in for the common goal of literacy for all students. Moving forward together through using similar instructional practices, shared lesson plans, and the power of collaborative professional learning conversations that are specific to the reading research. So it's that time of being thankful. I'm so very thankful for the leadership of Dr. Gordon and Dr. Bain, both in sponsoring and then supporting at very deep levels this impact literacy journey. It truly is all about the outcomes rather, for each and every student.
Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Thank you for your leadership. Mr. Shepard spoke about Dr. Gordon. We would not be here without the leadership of Dr. Paul Gordon. He is our reading science Superman. Every single reading science training that we have had in the Wenatchee School District, and there are too many to count. Every single time we have had a reading science training, I can't think of one that he wasn't there saying that we firmly plant our flag in the science of reading. And he's been very gutsy. He's been a champion. He's been unwavering in this commitment and dedication. And that's why we can do our good work. Mike and I in the learning and teaching, on the learning and teaching team, can help support what people in the field, because Dr. Gordon is so strong in this belief. He lets us run really hard and really fast. So I thank everybody for being here tonight to be able to share your story and how we are moving onward to 95. Thank you, everybody that again was here so that you could, thank you for sharing your story so that the community can understand that we are deeply committed to explicit direct instruction through a multisensory approach that has embedded routines that every scholar has access to every single day. Thanks for doing that really heavy lifting in the midst of a pandemic. And again, onward to 95. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah, Stacy, nice job. Thank you to everybody who participated tonight and was able to share a little bit of their story of how it's impacting them and their students. The piece that when you take it through the board's values around excellence in learning, equity, and accountability, it hits every one of those marks. And I really appreciated what Roxana said of a former Wenatchee student, an EL student, who recognized that she did not have that opportunity. And this isn't a Wenatchee story. This is happening across the United States. If you look at the NAEP scores, which is the only national assessment of student data that is really worth looking at, we continue to see the underachievement of reading for our students throughout the United States. It's an equity issue, exactly where Roxana talked about. If you do not have the ability to read, your opportunities are significantly limited. And then when you look at the equity, when you compare our Latino, Black, Indigenous, and students of poverty to white or affluent students, honest to goodness, this would not be allowed to occur in an affluent district. And I say that with great passion. What we're doing is going to transform kids' lives. When kids have the ability to read, and I told you this story before, little Natalie in 4th grade when I was visiting last year, when she was in tears and she put me in tears and everybody else, when she raised her hand and said, the thing that I hate worse about school is I don't know how to read. That's my why. That's why I champion the work that we do here. And so proud of the work Stacy and others. But the piece that I'm really proud about where we're at this year is the growth. What you heard, every one of these people, every one of these educators, they're leaders of this learning. And the piece that I would tweak a little bit from some people is it's a program. It is not a program. What they're doing is developing their content knowledge around the science of reading. You can't take that away from any of these people. You can take a program away. These people, our staff, have a deep pedagogical content knowledge that will continue to thrive in them for the rest of their educational career. And they will continue to make a difference. And that's the difference when you have incredible teachers in the classroom with deep content knowledge and you pair it with a good or a great curriculum. There's nothing to stop. But if you just have a good curriculum and teachers who don't have that depth of knowledge, you're not going to see those outcomes. So I'm just super proud of where we're at, super proud of every one of our educators and our students. So I'll stop glowing and hand it over to the board to ask Stacy and her incredible team any questions.
Thank you, Paul. I first want to say how refreshing it is to talk about something academic for a change. It feels like a long time since we've focused on student learning and growth. So I'm looking forward to hearing more of that and seeing more of the data. And I want to thank all the team members who came and presented. This is really important to our students, to our district. So thank you. Turn it over to any board members who want to make a comment.
I have a question or two. Great job, great work. I am seeing this at home with my kiddo. I mentioned at, I think it was my first board meeting, we were seeing the mapping, and then this year we're doing something else. And it was really interesting, Roxana's comment, because I myself am an English language learner, and I'm able to pick up on so many different things by listening to his phonology routines and whatnot, things that I didn't know. I have a master's degree and I didn't go through this within my education. So I know with COVID and all that, do we have any data to see the progression from the start to year 1?
So interestingly enough, thank you for that. And I do remember last spring your comment about watching the phonological awareness routine. That's really great to see it continuing. And yes, the answer is yes. And we track data like hawks at the district office. And so what we saw last year, even in the midst of a pandemic, I can get the percentage to you, and I don't want to say it in a community forum that is recorded because I may have the number wrong, but I will immediately email Dr. Gordon so that we can disseminate what the percentage was of scholars that met proficiency by the end of last year in the midst of emergency lockdown COVID. I can also let you know that yes, last year we saw growth in the midst of the pandemic when we weren't really teaching the way that we're teaching this year. Different expectations from SPI. This year, we have seen tremendous growth, and we have that in data. We are data junkies at the district office. And again, we will report that to Dr. Gordon to send to you. But we even received a phone call from the Education and Research Division from a certain company to say, this is outstanding growth. You're in the midst of COVID. This is typically not what people get without COVID. And what are you doing with this reading proficiency? We're super excited to partner with you. And so their Education and Research Division was interested in our amount of proficiency. I would like to say that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 567 scholars that started out not proficient that are now proficient in just 3 years within the school year online. But again, don't quote me on that for this year, but I think that that's pretty close at the elementary level.
Does the graphing consider those who may have, I feel like maybe our post-COVID results are a little bit skewed because of the number of participants. Does that reflect that maybe those who were already ahead were staying engaged and whatnot, or do we know that considers the same population of kids, I guess, is the question.
A really, really great question. Last year, so the number that I didn't quote from last year, I'll let you know what that percentage is. But this year, out of 2,677 students, I'm believing at the K-5 level, I'm believing that we had a large portion in the hundreds of students that moved from non-proficient to proficiency from September to now. So that would be comparing this year's scholars and their growth this year already. Which is why we've received a ping from the Education and Research Division to say, what are you doing there in the Wenatchee School District? So yeah, it's contemporaneous progress monitoring data, live data that is up to date. So, and the best part about data is that we can have data points that are stagnant, but even better than the stagnant data points that we collect that are quantitative, the qualitative data is very encouraging as well. And the qualitative data would be the feedback from the teachers. I feel so accomplished in my profession. I feel as if I'm watching reading occur in front of my eyes. I'm watching people move from non-proficient readers to proficient readers. And so there's that professional capital that we're also gaining out as a data point in using reading science practices in the classroom. So yeah, quantitative data, qualitative data, and I'll get those numbers to the school board. Sound good?
Sounds great. So yeah. Are you guys using the assessment? Is that through the Wonders curriculum?
We do have a variety of assessments. We have one assessment, iReady, and that's a screener. And then we also have a progress monitoring device that is contemporaneous, up-to-date performance data. We can see it. I can see it live right now. So yeah, that's the one that we lean into a little bit more because it's more valid and reliable.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to add a thank you for your enthusiasm and dedication to you, to those who presented, and to those people who didn't present but a part of the success. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to tag on to Martin's comments. Thank you to everyone who's using this impact learning and using it with our Wonders curriculum. It's I almost feel like it's Christmas, that we're getting this Christmas gift as a board about kind of all these kudos about, you talked about kind of that professional, Stacy, what was the term that you just used? The professional
capital?
Capital, yeah, that's what you use, professional capital. And, you know, in my profession, we call it warm fuzzies. So I would say that, you know, when you're getting your staff is getting that sense of, wow, I feel like I'm doing a really good job because these kids are learning to read. And I think 2 months to see that kind of growth is amazing. So such a gift. Thank you for sharing, everyone tonight who shared, about the power of, the professional learning that happened and how that's kind of infused throughout all our educators. It's phenomenal. And I'm so glad. I think we're on the right track. I'm excited that we're going to have a high percentage of kids with reading literacy in the future. And I think all we have to do is to continue to grow up. But as we all know, education is essential in our community to kind of give equity to many groups of people who are marginalized. And part of that education, if they don't have literacy, education may not get them as far. But I am so glad to hear that our literacy is growing in leaps and bounds. So thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to all who are using this with our students. I couldn't be any happier to hear about the progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sandberg, and thank you, Board of Directors, for this time.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing the data and more conversations about this topic at the future meeting. So next we have on our agenda CTE equity presentation.
Mike's gonna kick us off with that one.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce Wenatchee School District CTE Director Jake Buchholz and Wenatchee Valley Technical Skills Center Director Pete Jelsing. They're here to share their work around equity in the area of career and technical programs. Now, they've provided the board with quite a few pages of demographic information and charts and graphs, but the focus of the presentation is really going to be about the work that they're engaged in, leveraging their leadership to continue to positively impact not only our CTE programs, but also industry in our valley and in the state. And so I know they're excited to talk to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Pete and Jake.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm going to share my screen here real quick and go into present mode. And so, yeah, so Pete and I are here to talk about equity and the work that we're doing. To start off, we wanted to go through just kind of when we talk about equity, what it is that we are thinking through. So kind of our definition that we're working with is equity is grounded in the principle of fairness, and it refers to striving intentionally to provide all students what they need to succeed. And that's that key piece there, regardless of social identities. And we do that through analyzing, revising structural barriers, investing in proven equity-minded policies, practices, and processes. So as we go through, we're going to talk about, there's 4 slides that we'll go through that are kind of our general process. And then Pete and I will each talk about individual things that we're doing that tie in with those parts of our process to look at our program. Pete?
Okay, one of these slides is just acknowledging the acknowledgement of inequalities. And again, we'll just kind of go through acknowledging the history of CTE, because there is definitely value of knowing the ups and downs of CTE, the trends, I would say, and even in industry. Use data to identify equity gaps in access and in outcomes. And that is something that Jake and I have been spending quite a bit of time, even as, from last year. Identifying equity gaps that exist prior to enrollment is another thing that we, as we're going through and talking about this, that it's one of those lenses that we're like, okay, there are some gaps that exist. Identify barriers to enrollment and success. And that really comes down to that key point that I think Jake and I both will be focusing on in this presentation.
And yeah, and when we talk about acknowledging the history of CTE, it's acknowledging that there have been practices that were in place, going back years that certainly were not equitable and would put students into various tracks, and so those practices are the pieces that we're talking about with some of that too. The second thing is that it's important that we have a strategic and consistent equity lens. So one of the things in building trust around the idea of equity in CTE is every decision we make needs to run through a filter or a filtering process of how does this piece, whatever it is that we're working on, how does that further our goal of providing all students what they need? So everything should come back to that. That's a decision-making process. That's something that we put in place or is being put in place at the program level, classroom, department level, and classroom levels. And then the other piece to that is it's really about systemic. And so, like I said, program, department, and classroom, all the way through, what processes do we have in place to ensure that we're moving kids towards the opportunities that are available to them. It can't be left to chance. I think that's the big thing for us as we go through, and it's not left up to if they happen to have somebody that's engaged, that's an advocate for them, or whatever that may be. We have to build in the processes that we are in control of in order to make sure that we have every student with getting the service they need. Pete?
And then with that, I mean, as we are looking at those processes, I mean, I think ultimately the goal is to have high quality programs. Two of the measures that we were focusing on as we went through are investing in resources and programs that ensure high quality experiences. This would be an area of staff training and guidance, as well as equipment, supplies, instructional materials, and industry opportunities for students. The other piece would be process and systems to assess program quality and outcomes. It kind of goes back to what Jake was talking about. We have to have those systems in place. But I think it's giving all stakeholders a clear understanding of what is being evaluated, what are our goals, and having true conversations to ensure follow through in these goals and outcomes, but also in the area of program decision making, because we do get to a point where we have to make decisions. What programs do we run, but more so, which programs do we need to move away from? And so I think it's having those conversations and those measures in line that'll help guide us to those decisions.
And the last one, before we kind of jump into what we're doing that tie into these, is getting community and stakeholder buy-in. And so stakeholders, students, parents, staff, community members, business owners, advisory group members, that we are gathering their feedback in an earnest way. And then I think what is, in my view, equally important, if not more important, is showing that there's evidence of an actual response to that feedback. I think that people can lose, I don't know if hope is the right word, but lose interest in being a part of the solution and the conversation when they don't feel like their feedback is being heard or taken into account. Clear communication with stakeholders, that includes outcomes of our programs, the benefits of our programs. One of the pieces that we have to engage in a two-way dialogue is around the societal perception of CTE programs, and making sure that with our communication that we are clearly stating the benefits of the programs that we have now, and that they are not necessarily the same programs that we may remember from another time. So, and then last, spotlight, celebrate, and replicate successful programs. We have highly successful programs in our district and in our area. And so how do we take those and replicate what we're doing? So with that, kind of what we're doing, the work that's happening now and has already started to happen. One of the things I wanted to do when I first took the position was to dive in and get a good idea of where we were at based on our data with our outcomes, what's our enrollment, I mean, all kinds of different data points, and to set up a system of feedback loops, whether that's reviewing of our own programs within our program advisories. It's also getting feedback from advisory committees and then also from the general advisory. But so what I've worked on is to set up a semi-annual performance report, is what I'm calling it, just within our department, that we look at interest data based off of student interest surveys as a part of our career counseling piece, our enrollment data broken down by gender, ethnicity, special populations, outcomes for those same data sets, which are outcomes when we talk about grade outcomes, passage rates, proficiency, so measured in, if we're awarding dual credits through Wenatchee Valley College or college in the high school, or AP exam results, or industry recognized certificates. So all of those things will be measured, broken out by those groups. And then the last one there, job market. When we do this process, 2 times a year, what is the job market looking like with our projections, and are our programs lining up? So, with that one, it's really around, that kind of fits into the acknowledgement piece of where are our gaps, because that will be pretty clear when we start looking at it. The equity lens with that around our different group sets and how they're accessing our programs and what their outcomes are relative to each other. And then the high quality piece. Engaging stakeholders. This is a process we've already started with advisory, but the biggest piece that we need to work on that is in the roadmap for us, is to look carefully at the makeup of our advisory program, advisory committees, to ensure that we have a good diversity on those committees. The other thing that is in the process of being developed or expanded is the General Advisory Committee. So if you're not familiar, we have program advisories that advise each individual program, and they have a set of people that do that. And then there's a General Advisory Committee that would work with me. And so the process is to go through and kind of have a feedback loop that bounces between the two. So my General Advisory will advise me, I communicate with programs, and that information goes to them. They provide feedback to me, I go to the General Advisory. And that's how, in my mind, the best way to ensure that we're getting good information and information that we can act on from our community there. Student feedback, that'll be gathered in various ways through CTSO leadership, student surveys, interest inventories that are done, direct feedback to students, and then building in a longitudinal system of focus really on career interest development. And that's something that I've talked with some different folks about, including our middle school administrators, around the idea of using time throughout a year to build informational capacity in students around what are the options. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to get to the end when it's scheduling time and have people just making random choices. Again, it can't be left to chance. Programming adjustments, that's something that we will be doing as we look at what our numbers are for enrollment and all of that. Examples, expanding allied health in the middle school, biomed at the high school, possibly bringing ROTC in. And so these are things that are engaging, of high interest, and also aligned to the job market. So. Next, we are currently in the middle of developing our programs of study as outlined by OSPI to define courses that go 9-16 or basically high school into post-secondary. They have to include certificates or some post-secondary award, and they will also include a work-based component, one of 4 levels of that. And that work is ongoing, and we have staff members that are working to expand our reach into community organizations for that. And then the last one I already spoke about a little bit, and that's embedding the process into work that's ongoing throughout the year, not just at the end when it's scheduling time. There are a lot of things I could probably answer questions on, but trying to respect people's time, so going pretty quick. Pete?
Man, thanks, Jake. A lot of stuff. I've got pages and pages. So here we go. Happy Thanksgiving. Taking a look at this, data review and alignment. And I kind of looked at this from program specific. One of the things that they're kind of the ahas, and that's how I'm going to be presenting today. We went through and we did a lot of data, and we've been doing this now, again, like we talked about for the Perkins. So this project was an alignment too. And I would just say, as we go through this data review and alignment, the biggest takeaways I had, specifically for the tech center, were there's really 3 aha moments when it comes to equity that I took away. One, and this is not anything new, but it is the gender. There is a gender gap within programs. As we looked at data, yes, it may align with industry. However, I do still think there's an opportunity to be able to make those changes and decrease what that gap looks like. The other one I have walked away with is specifically when we're talking about barriers. A lot of times in the last few years, I've always looked at big barriers. I've looked at the barriers of transportation, being not at the high school, students having to come join us, to choose over high school friends versus coming to the tech center. The dollars and cents of it from a district's point of view, because we're taking FTE. But through this process, I guess one of the things that really hit me and has changed my kind of thinking and the direction that we need to continue to go is in individual programs. What are those barriers? And I think it's become very clear as we've gone into the pandemic. When you do not have students, and even when you have students in building, the way you teach and educate, it's a challenge, and it becomes more challenging because you do not have instructors that are helping and guiding you. What I mean by that is this: we have instructional concerns, I would say, where an instructor may or may not know that they are creating barriers just by what they say. We also have just the equipment and our technology piece. One of the examples that I've used before, but I think it's very relevant, is we're taking industry standard books that adults in the industry are using. And we have students who are not able to read at that level. What are we doing to help bridge that gap? So, and it's not just that, it's math, it's comprehension, it's our ELL students. What are these different ways, what are the barriers within programs that we really need to be focusing on? That was my second aha. The other one, I know we did talk about, I just, I think it's important because specifically at the Tech Center, we've got 8 programs. 8 programs. They cost quite a bit to run, most of them. The reality is for our thought process to change programs, it's a thought process that we have got to, I have got to, with help, come up with that process. How do we evaluate? How do we move forward? Yes, we've got our consortium, all of our superintendents that can help guide. Yes, we have our industry leaders who can help speak to what that looks like. But we truly need to give guidelines to our instructors, to our advisory members, so that we can clearly identify what is our need and what does it look like to have a solid program that meets a lot of different criteria. And equity is definitely a part of that. And looking at this data, that needs to be a part of this process. All of these things, it's coming up with a clear message on all of these, coming up with a process. All of these things together, but it doesn't just happen with me dictating, but it does happen as a group, and it happens with student input. Like I said, I know Jake brought it up, our advisory input, but also just making it very clear to our instructors, the needs of all students. That was a condensed version.
Well, and so we wanted to be somewhat quick, probably not as quick as we wanted to be, but basically to give as much time for questions as you guys would like to ask. And so if there are any, we'll do our best to answer.
Jake, I have a quick question. You, on your previous slide, you had the term CLNA.
Yeah.
Could you define that for folks who are watching, please?
Yep, and that's a comprehensive local needs assessment. That's a part of the process that is, it's a part of the Perkins grant process. It's when we get all stakeholders, and actually here we do it as in our area group. So Eastmont, Kashmir, Aniat, we're all together and we pull in all the stakeholders. We present a lot of this same kind of data, talking about what's going well in our program, what isn't, what do we need to improve on. And we get all that feedback from all these different stakeholders that are in ed, but they're also in industry around our area.
The college, yeah.
Yep, college, yeah. So.
Thank you for sharing that. I just had, I appreciate that you talked about student input, and our board members recently, we went to a conference and they had some equity pieces. And one thing that I heard over and over, not just from board members and superintendents and other staff, but also students, was giving students a voice. So I'm glad that you guys are getting feedback from students, but in kind of a variety of ways. But I'm wondering if you ever have the opportunity to reach out to those students who are interested in doing CTE, whether it's at the high school or at the tech center, but understanding what barriers are preventing them from doing it, or are they not choosing a particular class because their gender's not well represented and they have issues about that, or I don't know. But I appreciate that you guys are kind of looking at it, and I'm just wondering how we can kind of expand that student voice role, because it might help us in understanding those barriers a little more completely, and kind of equalizing some of those gaps that you guys are noticing. So I appreciate all this work that you're doing, and I'm so glad that you're able to kind of look with an equity lens, because we do want any of our students that are wanting to try out CTE classes to be able to pursue whatever it is and not feel like they have barriers,
Right.
preventing them from doing so.
Michelle, one of the things, and it's a great point, and Jake and I really chatted about this over the last really a couple months, because it's how do we bridge that gap, and specifically to gender. For us here at the Tech Center, and I would say even for Jake, because this is something that he also brought up, we may have a title of a program, and this is something that I continue to bring up with Jake. We may have construction trades, but the reality, the industry is so vast. The number of jobs that you really can choose from out of any one of these industries. I think one of the things that an idea that we're really kicking around is let's get students, let's get industry community members, let's create what are these different jobs, but let's look at it from a different point of view of different interests in life. And it could be gender specific, but it also interest level. And then really, again, for my programs specifically, and I know Jake could do the same, it's how do we guide? How do we share out this information that there is a pathway within this industry that would fit your need, your demographic, and then not just share what those things are, but truly create pathways within each program. I have 2.5 hours. Our second and third year students, and sometimes fourth year students who come to us, it is something that we could do. We could actually start going in different directions. Here's a quick example, and then I will stop. But Kim Anderson in programming, and this is video game programming. He's been doing this. He's working with Teals, Microsoft program, doing programming. But what he's noticed is that there's a lot of different interest in programming. There's a lot of different avenues to go. So what he's doing is when they come back, he is having them choose independent program, different independent education plans, and he's helped guiding them to where their interest is. And I just think it's a concept that, again, Jake and I are kicking around, and I think that it is one way that we could help bridge those gaps and not make it so general of you are going to learn to be a framer, da, 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 da. There are a lot of different avenues, and let's help guide you there. Thanks.
Pete and Jake, I have a question, and let's use the example of gender skewed programs. And I looked a little bit to see, and I was in a sense looking, is this a success if you go 90, 85, 80 over the years and the industry is at 98? You're doing something. But it made me think about there are two ways you can recruit the non-traditional group into a career. One is by the outside economy, external factors, expectations. The other is by students getting to learn from peers. Hey, it may be like this outside the school district, but inside the school district, hey, it's fun. I have friends there. Do you see anything qualitatively in that internal tool for improving your ratios?
Yeah, and I think so. Speaking from my side of things, that part of, and I'm trying to figure out. Let's see here. Looking at, I don't know where it went. Anyway, looking at what we're doing with some of our exploratory classes at the middle school level and pathway launch class at the high school level, to have more students get a little bit of a taste of what the offerings are. And by bringing in some of the dropping some of the allied health down to the middle school level. And then again, biomed, that could be part of our pathway launch, which is a class, if you're not familiar, pathway launch is a class that has a sampling of 3 different programs that we have, and they cycle through in that semester. And then from there, they're like, hey, I really like this one, and they can dive deeper into it. So that's one way. And absolutely, when we talk about high school students, that is a major way. of recruitment is the word of mouth from student to student about their experience in the program. And so that's why it's critical as we look at our staffing and our professional development and the work that we do. We have all these programs, but we have to make sure the experience is a really high quality experience for all students that are in there. So.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say, good work on this. One of the things that we talked about at our last board work strategic planning work session was one of the terms we used was personalized learning. And I think this is where that comes in. Looking at the barriers, concerns, entrance, outcomes. I mean, you can't get any deeper than that in regards to being able to look at the student as a whole and see, okay, what are the concerns? What are the barriers? And so, I mean, kudos, great work. And I think you guys touched on really good points that we can use throughout our school district. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. I think, there are so many layers to this question as evidenced by the pages and pages and pages of data that we received from you in the packet that I guess what I was hoping for was more of a summary of that data rather than my own interpretation, but we can come to that later. We can see it's pretty evident what the differences are, but one of the things that strikes me is that I'm glad that you're looking at the industry, who are the people that are working in the various industries. I'm glad that you're looking at the staff and identifying the lack of diversity in the staff, because I do think that if we bring folks in to talk to students about particular career paths, it's super important that our students can identify with the people that they are aspiring to become. So I appreciate that focus on diversity amongst the staff, and then including that in your industry. And in some cases, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, maybe, to find people who are representative role models for the students that might be interested in pursuing that pathway. But I know that you'll do it, and you'll seek those people out and bring them forward. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Is there any other comment from the board at this time? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So next on our agenda, we do have our policy updates.
Yeah, this is the first read. Again, the policy committee of Laura and Michelle are moving these forward. There's 5 different policies that are moving forward to the board, from world language competencies, which was some wording. It was some minimal changes there, really around the world language, indigenous, and making sure that we're recognizing that there are other languages than the typical languages that we associate with. The equivalency credit opportunities. This is really a CTE focused in making sure there's greater opportunity and more consistency in the credit within the CTE. The next one is enrollment, and this one hits from military families, homeless, and forgetting the last one on there. Let me grab it real quick. And keeping you in suspense. Thought I had a better memory than just holding 3 things in my head, but obviously not. Now my computer's.
Notification and dissemination of information about student offenses.
Yep. Juvenile offenders as well. So we have those. And then let me scroll back up to my, and then the notification of dissemination of information of student offenses. So that piece in there. and then the limiting immigration enforcement into schools. So those were the policies that the board reviewed, had conversations on, and then I'd hand it over to Michelle or Laura if you would add anything else for the full board.
I do, in just particular to the reference to the language, world language policy, that we had quite a conversation around that item, but you know, there are prevailing languages in our current culture, but there are also students who have abilities in other language that are maybe not as common. There may be some Native American students who are, you know, learning historical language of their culture. There may be people who, students who have ties to other countries because of their family history or where they lived before they came here. So we want just to make sure that those languages were also honored in the policy. So that was one thing. Michelle, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say just the other policies were pretty much recommendations from WASA. I don't think we had any major, we didn't have any big changes from that. And 3143 is kind of combining a number of different policies that that we already had. So they kind of streamlined some of this for us, and also there was a new Senate bill that was passed in 2019 for policy 4300. So again, these are kind of more technicality, just due to, you know, legislative changes and ease of reading and combining policies. So not a lot to add to that.
Very good. And
I had a minor questions.
Yep, go ahead.
Sure. Beginning with 2413, in one section, you've changed the composition, or was it has changed the composition of the team from will to may, and then creates flexibility as to who's to be on that team. Is there any particular significance in that?
There was a recommendation from Pete on that adjustment to that language.
Okay. Well, I was thinking a little bit about how we have had to work with making teams more flexible, but also then we have to police that they are representative.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder, that was more of a learning question. And then in that same policy in section 3, it looks like we've got a couple of boilerplate to replace with actual numbers. One was a place where there are a number of years, and the other is a place where payments are specified. And I'm quite comfortable that you'll get the right numbers in, but they're not there right now.
Thank you. We'll make sure that those are there for the final read.
Final reading, yeah. And then the last one in 4300, and this is more a curiosity item on page 2 of 4 for that one, where I got to go down. There's a requirement to post the information to be readily available to people who don't speak English and everything else, bottom of page 2. I was just kind of curious as to how we did that kind of thing. I'll just read it. District policies and procedures for gathering and handling student information, that's gathering immigration related information, shall be in writing and made available to students and their parents or guardians at least once per year. And I would like to know how we're going to do that.
I'm going to reach out to Diana or Kim, as I cannot remember the way we've communicated that out in the past.
And I guess my real interest is not so much this case by itself, but that's a kind of delicate information that we have to put out regularly. And I'd like to learn what best practices are.
Okay, so I'll come back to you on that one then.
Okay.
I'll follow up with you tomorrow on that one, or the whole board.
Yeah, they're all housekeeping things. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on the policies? Okay, so provided that we obtain satisfactory answers to the questions that were answered tonight, these policies will be up for final approval at our next board meeting, and they will be under the consent agenda. Okay. All right, moving forward, I believe we are now at board communication. Is there any business or communication that the board members would like to share with the rest of us?
Actually, I have a couple this week.
Okay.
Every week, the board gets a summary of the week's activities from the superintendent, telling us what the key people in the whole district's been doing. And I actually made a comment that I used the word brutal. For last week, I'd never read such a brutal list of so many difficult things being done in 1 week. And I had said thank you to the staff privately, but I think I'd like to take the opportunity to say that thank you goes out publicly. And it's not only the school district staff that have a brutal week with everything we have to do right now. Students have to work really, really hard and survive a lot. Parents and caregivers have to do the same thing. And this really is a moment to recognize that everybody is making sacrifices. You do some, your neighbor does some, and I just wanted to pay tribute to that considerable effort. And following that, we all went to the Washington School Directors Association's annual conference last year, which was by Zoom, so much less exciting than normal. But Michelle talked about it too. I think a take-home point I took was listening to how important it is to find a good way for students to tell us what they think and what we should know. And I think that can be little students in elementary school as well as big students. And I think this has been around for a long time and we do a lot, but I think it's an interesting thing to sit up and think about right now. And that's my board communication. Thank you from one hand and learning from the other.
Thank you, Martin.
I just kind of want to add, this was my first year attending the WSD conference. So I don't have anything to compare it to, but as you probably already know, my focus on the conference was the equity and inclusion sessions, which I thought were great. So I still need to go back and watch more of the non-equity and inclusion diversity sessions. But I think for me, it was really eye-opening. You know, we've done good work, but we have so much work to do. You know, one of the things, it really made me think about where our district is now and the direction that our district needs to head into. You know, we talked, was it Michelle that brought it up earlier, or Laura? You know, the importance of having representation within our staff. We can't continue to be a district that says we're okay having 2 Latino administrators on our team. When you put it down into context, that's 10% of our building administrators that are administrators of color. That's 2. You know, if you look at our teachers, the same thing. So as we grow, as we change, I think we need to be deliberate. We need to have follow through and say, look at them as opportunities for us to not wait for the diversity to come to us, because that's not working. We need to go out and find these high qualified people that are out there to fill the need of our district, the need for our students. And you know, there's experts that do this. So this is not something new, because there's so many districts, not just on the west side of the state, but also on the east side of the state. Our neighboring school district, Quincy, actually was one of the presenters on one of the sessions. So I think, you know, these are really difficult conversations to have, but we're in a different time now. You know, we've gone long enough without this need to where the point where we need to start making some serious changes and not be okay with our token administrators, school board members, teachers, you know. So again, you know, tough conversations, but I think we're in a really good state. Semi-new superintendent, you know, new board, strategic planning. it's time to just be deliberate about this and have the open conversations. You know, there was a session that I felt was really, really neat. I texted Martin about it just because it was really personal. It really related the experiences that a person of color goes through. And I think Paul got a little bit of that experience last week. So just, you know, just let's keep the conversation going and let's be very strategic about how we move forward with it, with all these pockets of inclusion, diversity, ethnicity, and whatnot. So.
Great, thank you.
Maria, I just want to say, I just want to tag on to your comments. Thank you for summarizing that so nicely. I think the fact that we have equity as a value is going to lead us in some exciting new directions. And you're right, we have a lot of work ahead of us, as you know, any of us that went to the equity conference, to see kind of all the pieces that we still have yet to kind of put in place. But I think it's an exciting time. And like you said, we've got the strategic priorities kind of lined up. We've got our strategic committee is going to be looking at those. And so it's very exciting. And I hope that as we move forward, that we're listening to that student voice, you know, and that I think can be kind of tricky, because those of us who are adults think we all know best. But as we heard at the equity conference, you know, we need to be checking in with students. We need to be talking to them personally to see not just what the barriers are, but what things are holding them back, maybe up here, that's preventing them from taking, I'm going to use an example, a fire science class if you're a female student. So I know we've had students in fire science who have been female, and because one went to state a year or so ago, but the numbers of those have been really low. So I want, you know, I think one of the things we heard at the equity conference is we don't want to see these gaps. We don't want to have to predict achievement gaps or other gaps based on how we see students performing. We don't want to have to guess, oh, that person is living in poverty or whatever due to their test scores. You know, we don't want to be able to guess test scores. We want to see everybody high performing, but we don't want to have it be predictable based on the color of your skin, your socioeconomic level, your gender, whatever. So we do have a lot of work to do, but I'm really appreciative of so many great presenters that we had at our conference. And I think the really exciting thing about this year's conference, even though it was online, is that so many of those are going to be accessible to us as a board. So for those of you who didn't get to watch some of those really exciting pieces on equity, we can watch those at a workshop. I think we have a lot of possibilities in front of us, and I think those are available through sometime in July. So I would encourage that we do some of that work because we have those resources available to us. So, and I'm glad everybody could attend. So thank you.
Great point. You know, regarding the student voice, one thing that came to my mind when you all were speaking is how brutal the students were on the student panel. I mean, did you know? I mean, they didn't hold back. You know, you all are paying lip service. You say you want this, and then, what actions did you actually take? It's like, wow, holding the adults accountable. That was pretty impressive. And another idea that came up that I really liked was the idea of doing a book study, a group book study, where we chose a book to read collectively so that we all sort of could get the concepts together. I don't know if the board is interested in maybe doing that. Something we could think about. And the other thing about this conference is it just really built my empathy for all our students that are learning online, because I was not a good online student. I just will say that, you know, the kids hanging upside down from the desk and all that kind of stuff right here. Yep. Not that I was doing that, but it is hard. And I do want to acknowledge that and recognize that, because even though you're here in your own home environment, trying to do something, there are many distractions that pull you away, and it's not the same as being in the room with your peers. And I'll tell you, one advantage of watching the things online is that you have this fear of being called into a group and having to participate. If you're watching the recording, you get off the hook on that one. So anyway, it was an interesting experience, and appreciate everybody who was able to participate and put that on for us. So
I would be open into, like I said, actually all of the sessions I went to were based on equity, diversity. So, but I would be open to other recommendations that you guys felt was worth the time to sit, for the hour, that can help as a new board member, looking for those recommendations rather than trying to guess, if it was of quality or not. I'm sure they all were, but some more than others.
That's a great idea, Maria. And board members, if you just want to send me your recommendations, and I'll put them in next week's weekly update, just so everybody kind of has that same learning opportunity that Maria is asking for. That's pretty cool.
Sounds good.
Great.
I also just want to communicate that, and I don't know if Paul's going to make this announcement, but I just really appreciate that the district is putting their COVID-19 cases on the website now. I think that's really good for transparency, for our community to know kind of how we're doing, how we're getting it right. And, we're going to have some cases, but I think it's really good for our community to see what our numbers are in our staff and our students in the different buildings. So thank you to Paul and your staff for doing that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Okay, superintendent's report.
Okay, I'm going to have Kelly join me as we talk about the hybrid update. There's a lot of conversation. We get a lot of emails. Board members, myself, get a number of emails, open, close. That's kind of what we hear on a daily basis. And Kelly's going to kind of walk the board through some of the realities that we're facing on a daily basis. And I want to be clear. I want our students back. I think majority of our staff want our students back. I wish it were that easy. I wish it were just as easy to be able to say, we want kids back, we're bringing kids back. Kelly's going to walk you through the reality of what we're dealing with right now. And the reality is I thought, as I looked at it yesterday, I didn't look at it today, we're roughly 800 cases per 100,000. So there's a lot of COVID in our community, and how it's impacting us is really in our students and our staff, because our students and staff live within our community. And when that's happening, it's having a direct impact on schools. It's not this 800 number that sits out here, so we shouldn't bring kids back. It's more of a reality of, do we have staff to be able to continue keeping our schools open and being safe? Because what we continue to see is our schools are safe places for our students and our staff, and we're doing a really good job there, and I'm pleased with that. However, our staff and our students, all of us, when I say staff, that's all of us, that's district offices, building, we all live within our communities, and every time we're out and about, we have that opportunity to be exposed or to have a positive interaction. And those things impact our school district. So I've asked Kelly to put together a presentation for the board and to be able to demonstrate what are we dealing with, what's Kelly dealing with, what are principals dealing with on a daily basis that really allows our schools to be open, classrooms to be open, or classrooms to go offline. So Kelly, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sure, let me get this going.
Okay, so really, I just want to give you guys a quick update on the guidelines that we have to follow in order to keep our buildings open. Every time we get a notification of an exposure and what that looks like, and then at the very end, kind of how that impacts our buildings. And I just did a quick snapshot of 1 week once we get to that point. So I'm sure everybody is as familiar as I am with all the COVID symptoms. They look just like the flu or a cold. And so just wanted to put that out there for you guys to kind of look over. I'm not going to go through each of them, but as you look, it's, you know, all those symptoms we all get at least once or twice throughout at least the winter. So what to do? You know, if you have COVID symptoms, which are a whole host of things, and think, you know, runny nose, a persistent cough, maybe a slight fever, you have to stay home. And as like, especially Maria knows, having an administrator as a husband, those are things that our educators, our paras, our bus drivers, food service ladies, us ourselves, we come into work with some of those symptoms fairly regularly. I'm sure you guys even do. And as soon as you get one of those, that nose starts dripping, you can't come to work. And that is very impactful, and especially in our realm where it's hard to find subs. And so we have what's called Class A symptoms and Class B symptoms. Class A are a little bit of the more serious things, the loss of taste or smell, that kind of stuff. Our Class B, kind of that runny nose, maybe a little cough, a headache. And so we treat them both similar and different. Both of them mean you do not go to work, at least for the day. If you have just one B symptom, you're out and it's resolved within 24 hours, you get to come back to work. If it lasts more than 24 hours, you either have to get a test or you're out for 10 days. And that's for some very basic stuff. Then you go over to the Class A symptoms, not so similar or not so common of issues. But in order to come back, if you have Class A symptoms or multiple Class B symptoms, you have to get a COVID test or you're out for 10 days. And I think you guys can probably see the impact that would have on a building for some very common issues that people have. This goes also for students. So this is not just staff. This is what we evaluate students with as well. One of the big things is COVID exposure. We deal with this, I would say on a daily basis, but it's like every 15 minutes, there's a new COVID exposure. And that is not within our buildings. That is, you know, there are staff members and our students, but it is primarily coming from outside of our buildings. It's that I had dinner with somebody and they have since tested positive. Those are the exposures we're dealing with. And really an exposure is being less than 6 feet from somebody who has a confirmed case of COVID-19 for a cumulative 15 minutes or more. This is not you being in the same room with somebody when you're socially distanced. This is not passing them in the hall quickly. This is not you were exposed to somebody who was exposed to somebody who was positive. And I will say that last one, that is the one we deal with the most. But somebody I had dinner with was exposed to somebody who was positive. That is not considered an exposure. Exposure quarantines. So somebody who is truly exposed, so you have been in close contact with somebody who has tested positive for COVID, you have to quarantine for 14 days from that last exposure date. Now, obviously, we are talking about how this affects our buildings. That's very impactful. So as soon as somebody goes to dinner with somebody that has tested positive in the last 2 days of COVID-19, they're out of work for 14 days. And I gave an example in there and I don't need to read it. You guys can read that. Testing positive, very similar to when you're exposed, you're quarantined. The interesting thing is you're quarantined for 10 days from the date of your positive test. So you have to be in quarantine for those 10 days. Your symptoms must improve. They don't necessarily have to go away, but you also then have to be fever-free for 24 hours without medication in order to come back. So it's a minimum of 10 days. That is not, that's kind of what we start with. And then we just tell everybody, if you continue to have symptoms or they're not improving or you're not fever-free, you continue to be out. So that's that minimum window. It can go longer and it most certainly usually does. You also have that if you have multiple people in your family. So if you have one If you have your child who tests positive and you're negative, you are out for your child's 10-day quarantine plus your 14-day exposure quarantine. So that's a 24-day window. And that's assuming that you don't have anybody else in your house that tests positive. So that's a pretty big deal. So this is kind of the impact on one of our buildings that we had for a week window. I did a Friday to Friday. I just wanted to give you an overview. So this is assuming this is one teacher tested positive on this day. So this is our positive teacher right here. We have exposed employees, and then we have people who just said, I'm sick. So they're not all from this positive person. They could be other exposures. The sick, or I've called in sick, that could be they just have one of those COVID symptoms. They have a doctor's appointment. We don't know. It's still a drain on the system. And then these three were actually staff members who were not considered exposed, but because the classroom was shut down, they then are working from home. So they're just more people out of the building. And then these are the students who either, all of them were either exposed or sick of some sort, no positives. But this will show you on Friday the 13th, just coincidence, we picked that day. That's how many staff members were out of the building for this and how many students were missed. And then as the week goes on, everything continues to grow. And that is pretty typical because as you guys saw, they're not out and then back. They are out. And then you have another person and they are out. And so if you look how the week goes, by the next Friday, it looks a bit different. It's not that it grows exponentially, but it's at least one person a day, whether that's students or staff. Now, I will say one of the really great things, even though this looks atrocious, for elementary, we are able to move some of our PALM specialists, our ISs, our MTSS coaches, our counselors, God bless them all, into these classrooms to help fill some voids because you don't get a warning sign. Sometimes when you're getting sick, you get that like, oh, I don't feel very good today. Generally, these symptoms, your nose starts running in the morning. You don't always know that the night before. Somebody calls and says, hey, I want to tell you, I tested positive yesterday. You didn't get a warning sign. So these are last minute things. So we have to hurry up and find somebody to fill these in-person classes. And right now we just aren't able to get subs. It's not for the lack of them wanting. They too are in the same place. They have exposures. They have positives. They are scared. We went so long without having subs working. They also found other jobs. And then they also have the opportunity for unemployment. And a good chunk of them were in our high risk category as well. They were our retired teachers. And so we're struggling with getting subs in. But this is how we've kept the K2 alive. As you can see, that would be quite difficult to do when we were thinking about bringing 3-5 back. This was one of the deciding factors that we were sharing with you guys is it's really, we can maintain the K2 because we can move some of these other staff members into it. But once you expand that, we have more people that we have to try to cover in person. It gets harder and harder. And so do you have any questions on this that maybe I can answer?
I think that's a really relevant presentation, Kelly. Thank you so much. I think we realize that, it's not so much the kids getting sick, but I think I read in one of the committee meeting minutes that, we have to be sure that our staff as a whole is making good choices outside of the classroom, not just that they're social distancing and masking in the classroom. And we know people want to be responsible, but it just takes one exposure, right? So I just wanted to bring up the concern that one of our public commenters brought, since it kind of ties in with what you're talking about, in terms of protocols. If we get a batch of cases in a building, an outbreak, I don't know what outbreak is being defined as by the county health, the local health district, if it's cases of 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 or whatever, but maybe you've had some conversations with them and can tell us a little bit about that, how that would what's, how our district would address that kind of scenario with not just staff members and students, but also the community. Thanks.
Sure. So we haven't had the conversation of what is an outbreak per se, but they have told us very clearly that if we have 2 cases within one classroom that seem to be linked together, then that would be considered an outbreak in that classroom, and we would then be shutting down that pod. And we have shut down pods, not because we've had outbreaks in those classrooms, but because one, we weren't able to fill them, and so we needed the teacher to continue teaching. Or there were just enough kids that were out sick that we just needed to shut it down. And so that's probably the closest thing. I feel like they have left that really open, because as soon as we start putting this is what it is, and then we're going to shut you down, then they feel like it's really hard to bring that back when it's like, well, you haven't hit this, but you still maybe need to shut down. And so that's why we have these ongoing conversations with them. We have a building right now that has what looks like a pattern to it. And so we reached out to the health department and said, okay, we've been contacting you on each of the cases and you haven't mentioned this, but it looks like a pattern. And when we really broke it down, they're like, it appears on the surface until you really get into those details. And then there's no connection within the building. It's just coincidence. And so we really just continue to have those conversations. And we've built a really good rapport with pretty much everybody there, so that we can, they know that we're erring on the side of caution. So every time they give us advice, it really is, well, here's what you have to do. Here's what I know you guys are gonna do. So I would say if we had what they considered an outbreak, we would get that out to the building immediately. I think we've done a really good job responding when we are told of a positive or a possible positive, of getting that out to the staff members who need to know immediately, and then to the staff at the general staff as quickly as possible. And the reason we don't do that general staff email immediately is because we want to be able to cover everybody we believe was in close contact, and then send that out to everybody else. So those who maybe were in close contact that we weren't informed about say, there was somebody coughing in my face the other day. I wonder if it's that person. Let me reach out and see.
So Kelly, just quickly, just taking it back to the public comment at the beginning of today's meeting. We are notifying the people. Walk that through one more time, just in relationship to that comment that Brian made at the beginning of the meeting for me.
So kind of just the process we go through when we get notified? Sure.
Thank you.
So as soon as, I'll just use a positive case, for example, somebody notifies us that they have tested positive. We start asking them the questions. When did you test positive? When were you last in the building? We give them the definition of close contact. Who do you believe you were in close contact with? And then depending on what they say, we expand on our questions. A lot of times people now already know what we're asking, so they just, here's all the information. We then immediately get on the phone to everybody that they notified us that they were in close contact with. Almost every single time they already know. Because it's really hard to kind of have those conversations without saying, hey, just, Paul tested positive. We have to say, somebody has notified us that you were in close contact with them and they have tested positive. And so we have to go by what the employee tells us. We then give them direction based on when their close contact date was, and then send them home. And then I generally try to follow up when it starts to get close to their return, to make sure that they haven't had any symptoms and, did they have a test? What was that result? Has anybody else in the house had any symptoms? We kind of go through that. Once we have notified all of this close contact, I send the principals an email letting them know these staff members will be out. Please reach out to them regarding working from home or whatever accommodations you can make to keep them working during that time. And then I send a general notice out to all the staff members in that building. Then Paul sends you guys an email notifying you of it. We try to do it as quick as possible. Sometimes it's within hours. It just depends on how many people are close contact. and how quickly, they pick up their phones and we get through that.
I really do appreciate this review of the process. I think in the communications that we've received, both at the board meetings and in writing, is that there's a level of fear. People are fearful for their own safety. They're fearful for their families and, those that they might expose who are vulnerable. And this reiteration over communication, I think, is a great tact we ought to take. If we over communicate our processes, if we over communicate that we are, putting up the numbers on the dashboard and just continuously send out that message about how you're addressing these things and how we are as a district, I think the confidence, will return or, be validated. People want to feel safe in their work environment, and I can certainly understand if they have some doubt that could generate fear. So it kind of in that vein, I'm hearing, we're all hearing, not only from staff, but from parents and community members, on both sides of the issue. And sometimes we're hearing both sides of the issue from the same person. But in that vein, I personally would like to reinstitute the, COVID meetings, specific meetings that we were having, before the numbers went down. The numbers are just, skyrocketing back up. And I'd like to propose that we put that back on our agenda and we add those extra meetings in between our regular board meetings. And I'm open to, feedback on that from Paul and the other board members, but I'm saying that because I know that we've had some pointed communications from people who are saying, why is the board, shifting, its approach on 3 to 5, for example, when, that decision was made between a board meeting. And so between board meetings. And I think it's not that we didn't support the decision. It's just that in the interest of, having public dialogue on a particular topic before a decision is made, that we can also be supportive of the superintendent's office and staff, when things do change midstream. So that's sort of the reason why I was putting that forward and leaving it up to everybody else to chime in on that topic.
Well, I agree that over communicating is probably more essential now than ever because, as you said, we want people to know that our staff is doing everything it can, not only to educate every student to the best of its ability, for the best of each student's ability, but also to protect staff and students as well. So I feel as a board member that our staff has been really good about communicating the positive cases and kind of the shifting, but I'm wondering if instead of having kind of a regular extra meeting that we have kind of a low threshold for requesting a special meeting if things change. For instance, we've walked back our reopening for 3rd to 5th graders. So when that decision was made, maybe calling a special meeting for the next day to kind of have a more public presentation of that data. So it doesn't have to just go out in a newsletter, but I think some people watch board meetings and some people don't. So, but I think if we can communicate in a number of different ways, it's good. But I don't know if we need to have regularly scheduled extra meetings. But I think having special extra meetings, if that's meeting the community's needs to have more communication, if some people are only turning into board meetings and not checking the website or getting emails, but hopefully they're getting news in different ways. So that's my 2 cents worth, because I don't want to feel like the staff is having to drop what they're doing to come to a board meeting because we said we want an extra board meeting. but because there's valid information that needs to be communicated. So I don't know. That's kind of where I sit.
I think there's some times and dates that would be critical. One, as we've discussed, would be we get a surprise or a change in plan has to be made. And the other would be, let's say you're coming up to a planned deadline. I'm being optimistic now, to return to a class, or people are on Christmas break, but there's a big event 3 days after school reopens. And so I think that's another way of looking at it, is the need is variable, but somewhat predictable. I don't know whether this works well in terms of protocol and efficiency, but I would be quite happy if there was a way for us to ask the president and the superintendent to work together, and then they would call meetings under exceptional circumstances. I don't know whether that would work, rather than us say every week we're going to do it. Because there's some weeks when, well, another thought that occurred to me, there may be weeks when we think nothing's happening, but the staff are planning like crazy. And if circumstances change, then their planning changes, and maybe the board should know what's going on. That's just another kind of exception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would appreciate having a little bit more notice of the big events, and whether it's facilitated through, we put a meeting on the calendar, and if there's no, just to hold the date and time, and there's nothing to report, then maybe we cancel it. I don't know if that's easier than calling a special meeting when there's bigger events or need to know things. And I don't look for these types of meetings as more for the community to know, although I'm happy to see when they do tune in. It's more for just keeping the board up to speed, so we can then speak intelligently or know kind of ahead of folks. Because I'm guessing most people don't get their information from the board meeting, but it would be a good heads up to know what's been discussed, and to have this forum just for us to communicate with each other. I know that was really important in the initial COVID days. It's the only time we can legally communicate with one another, to know where the board's at, or especially in terms of, as we get closer and we pull back from reopening and opening and reopening, I'd like to see it a quicker trigger decision when things are all in the clear, assuming we've set some of the infrastructure during this, continued period of closure. So it can be a bit of a quicker decision, because I think that's ultimately the goal. So whether it's set the meeting and cancel it, or I'm always amenable to a special meeting, especially as long as we're able to do these Zoom formats. It's not terribly difficult. Having said that, I will be out of town the next 2 weeks, but I can Zoom in, call in if I need to.
Yeah, it's for a social person like myself, I'm often hearing things through third party. So there is a benefit in having regular meetings, to be able to know when you are asked. And it's amazing how information's, even though we're staying at home, information still circulates. We're connected somewhere. But logistically also, like Julie said, would it be easier or easiest to just kind of have regular board meetings, every other week, and then use them as on a need basis, versus calling a special meeting with the Open Public Meeting Act that we need 24-hour notice to the public, or if I'm even saying that right. Yeah, I mean, because we want to make the time, for everybody's time is valuable. And so, if we set every other week for COVID and we're not really, there's nothing new to report, then I think there's no value in meeting.
Yeah. I like that idea, and I'd be happy if the need would disappear. That would be fantastic. Be fantastic. What does everybody think about the idea of putting dates on the calendar, and then, as the dates approach, that we cancel if they seem unnecessary?
I mean, because when we were doing them in the past, before in the spring, there was no agenda, right? I mean, the agenda was COVID update. And then once in a while, we'd have a contract or something in there. So would just thinking about Kim, would it be easier to schedule board meetings and then cancel, or to schedule, or to work with the special meeting process?
So
Either way, aren't they special
outside
meetings?
of
Yeah,
any
they're all
meeting outside, they're all special.
yeah. So there's the notice happens anyway, but it's probably more predictable.
Yeah.
If we know that Tuesday at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. and Paul, I defer to you if Tuesday's not the best day because you know that most of your COVID plans change on Thursdays. Like I'm all about a different day. But whatever's easiest. Like I said, if it's too ever changing and we have our COVID meeting on Tuesday and then a big update happens Thursday, then maybe that's meetings on top of meetings, but whatever works.
Just from my perspective, I think the bigger issues that we want to be talking about are not going to be happening for a little bit. I think we're in the, we're, lack of a better terminology, we're swimming in COVID right now. I don't see us coming back anytime, in the near future with the amount of staffing we're trying to keep going with, the thinking around, I think we've got to see what happens out of the Thanksgiving. I'm really worried about Thanksgiving. When you look at the national airports, it gives you great concern and great pause about what we're doing. But what I would commit to is that Laura and I would work together in saying, okay, we're feeling like there's a lot of information that we need to share, and that Laura and I would then say, okay, it's going to be on Tuesday or on Thursday. And like Martin said, that Laura and I would work together to say, this is the best time for it. Because I do worry about, because we have to post those 24 hours in advance. I don't want to confuse anybody on the community if we're posting something that we're not meeting. I think what I would commit to is that there's no breaking news without a board meeting. And that way we're really being respectful of everybody's time. And then we're not getting the community, is something happening this week? Is something happening next week? When's it happening? But I firmly commit to making sure that there is no breaking news without a board meeting.
And I can live with that. That sounds good to me. I mean, I agree, as much as I want these updates right now, looking at numbers, and it still irks me that we're just looking at numbers in some ways, but yeah, I feel like we're swimming in COVID. We're not going to be out of this anytime soon, certainly not before the holidays. So it's just I've resolved myself to, it sucks. But
well, this might be just curiosity, but the state website hasn't published last Sunday's data, and it now says they won't publish it till the 30th. So there's a whole week skipped. Do you get any information during that time limit that we don't see? And I assume there's no particular significance to that.
Yeah, pretty much what you said, Martin. I mean, we do at times, but I'll be honest, like Maria shared something with me today that I'm like, I've never seen that before. So I think I get quite a bit, but at times I don't get everything. We'll get we're now getting on a regular basis, kind of the breakdown of COVID within Chelan Douglas County. But I don't get like Maria sent me an announcement from Chelan Douglas County today that outlined some things. I'll regularly get some information from like Dr. Butler or one of the other health officials. But honestly, it's a lot of the same stuff. It's the biggest factor is the COVID going up. That's kind of what I'm seeing right now as a consistent piece for us. And I want to be clear. I want to make sure, one of the biggest factor for us right now is how do we stabilize our staffing? For me, that's the most important thing right now. In recognizing there's a correlation between the amount of COVID in the community and our staff. But I've got to somehow stabilize our staffing. Again, as Kelly alluded to, we have 3 classrooms going online because of exposures and positivities. And we're struggling trying to keep just K3 right now. And as Kelly alluded to, we're fortunate to have Palms, ISs, and others who are stepping into those classrooms, because we have very few substitute teachers right now for us. So
Yeah.
that's my biggest concern right now.
Yeah. One element that I haven't seen us look at yet is our comparison to other industries or groups, whatever the classifications are that the state has for businesses. And I know that there's a report out there. It's called the statewide COVID outbreak report, and it breaks down the risk by industry, and so you can see that from highest to lowest risk, and kind of would help us in our decision making as well, to see how we compare to things like food service or personal care, nightclubs, blah blah blah. There's a whole list of other things on there that would be interesting to see.
Piece that I know is inside the schools, we're doing outstanding.
We're in medium.
Yeah, but I'm just using our data points, our 3 weeks. We're doing really well with no exposures from person to person, because we're following those strategies. I mean, we are adamant on those, and we follow it as cabinet. We don't meet as cabinet ever or another person without our masks and social distancing. Staff's doing a great job. They really are. But yeah, I would say from our industry framework, what I'm seeing across the state, as I talk with other superintendents, they're saying the same thing. Problem is, kids, staff, we all go out into our communities, and we still have those opportunities to be exposed. And then you're in Kelly's wheelhouse and going through all the things that she has to go through. And those are all directed by the health, those are what we have to do, the Department of Health. So that's not even the Chelan Douglas County, that's the Department of Health. Those are the protocols Kelly must follow through with.
Right.
I think we have to remember that even if our transmission rate is very low, if any of our staff are getting infected through the community, not in their school buildings where they work, but in the community, then they can't teach, right? And that's the limiting factor for us. So if we don't have enough staff, we can't teach in person. And then if they're super sick, they're not going to be able to teach online, right? So that's our limiting factor, really. And I know, Paul, you've mentioned, you and I had a conversation one day, and you were talking about some districts that were really struggling with their staffing. And so we don't want to end up in that situation, obviously. It's one thing to go from in-person learning to online, but if you can't do online because your teachers are sick, then what are you going to do, right? So anyway.
Well, and also to add on to that, sorry, Michelle, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
Kelly mentioned that a pod, we move from in-person to online. All that shift in a student's learning is disruptive. Was I disappointed when 3-5 was going to go back into in-person? Of course, because we were ready to go. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are doing this whole roller coaster of emotions. We're going back. No, we're not going back. Oh, we're back. Oh no, now we have to go back to remote learning for 2 weeks. It's just not a healthy environment. So, I think if we can continue to have a good, I guess the call is out for our community. We need to work together to get all our kids back into the building. I kind of see this as a warning call, because if our numbers in the community continue to grow, our numbers within our buildings are going to probably, increase. And then we're going to be taking a huge step back by bringing back our K2 kids back to remote learning. And that's not where we want to be at. We want to continue moving forward. While Kelly was doing her presentation, I'm thinking, well, what all student attendance? I'm pretty sure our student attendance for K2 is probably all over the place. And again, it's just another disruption. Although they're getting that social emotional, the great stuff of being with your peers, you're also, I imagine that kids are also losing a lot of instruction time because they can't be in the classroom, because they have symptoms, because they've been a potential exposure. So I know this is hard for the community to hear that, you know, we're kind of putting a pause. But we also have to think about all the factors. Not only do we not have, may we not have staff to teach our kids, because without teachers, there's no instruction, but also just the roller coaster of a student's emotions, whether you're in the building for 3 weeks and then now you're learning from home for 2 weeks and then you get break and then you're back in the building and the potential of going back. So there's just so many factors, and I just appreciate the work that this district is doing so to avoid, you know, all this roller coaster of emotions, because it was rough in our household last week. You know, and I know a lot of parents feel that way, and we're ready to go, but I'd rather just slow and steady, you know, so we can get to the finish line.
Okay. So with that said, we will not then have a meeting on the calendar for December 1st, as was potentially offered, unless there's some action going to be taken by the district that would end up in the newspaper or other media that would attract attention. So that said, our next meeting then is December 8th, which is also our reorg meeting for the board. So we'll be talking about the officers' roles as well as committee positions at that meeting and taking action on those. So everybody have a safe Thanksgiving, and we will see you then.
Hi, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.